At first glance, Puma Punku does not look ancient. It looks exploded. On the Bolivian altiplano, 13,000 feet above sea level, giant blocks lie scattered like industrial wreckage. The angles are sharp, the fragments too cleanly cut for modern myth to leave alone. So the legend arrived on schedule. Aliens, lost technology, a vanished super-civilization. But Puma Punku's real mystery is what happens when a monument is shattered so completely that later centuries mistake damage for impossibility. Puma Punku is part of Tiwanaku near Lake Titicaca, whose power peaked between 8,500 and 900. New radiocarbon modeling cuts against the old fantasy of bottomless antiquity. The best estimate places Tiwanaku's founding around AD 110, implying rapid change rather than mythic prehistory. Even the Inca, arriving after the city had long been abandoned, folded the ruins into their own origin story. Here, they said, Viracocha made the first peoples from clay before sending the first Inca on to Cusco. By the time Spaniards saw the site in the 16th century, it was already ruined. Then came surveyors, treasure hunters, rail builders, restorers, politicians. One archaeologist's verdict is, there is not a single stone in place. Of roughly 150 surviving andesite blocks at Puma Punku, none remain where they originally stood. That is why the place keeps producing bad explanations. People read a wreck as if it were still standing. Once you stop doing that, the precision begins to look human again. Puma Punku sat on a T-shaped platform. 17 giant sandstone slabs created a smooth base. The largest is more than 8 meters long and weighs about 83 tons. Above them stood finely cut andesite architecture, assembled from repeated forms, including the famous H-blocks. What looks futuristic is really standardized stonework and planned assembly, not random brilliance. A system. Modern archaeology has made the site more impressive by making it less magical. A UNESCO drone survey, carried out between October and December 2016, with aircraft capable of flying above 4,000 meters, mapped Tiwanaku with less than 4 centimeters of error. The explored area stretched beyond 401 hectares, with ditches, canals, roads, and more than 100 circular and rectangular structures. Puma Punku itself was redefined as a 17-hectare religious complex, with 2 more buried platforms. The ruin was one fragment of a much larger ceremonial landscape. Then comes the modern question, how did they move the stone? Red sandstone likely came from about 10 kilometers away. Green andesite came from the Copacabana Peninsula across Lake Titicaca. In 2002, researchers and Aymara specialists tested transport with a Totora reed boat about 14 meters long, 5 meters wide, and 2 meters high, built from 3,000 bundles of reeds. The master boat builder was Paulino Esteban. The raft's porous body was meant to filter wave water, kicked up by the altiplano winds. The experiment moved a multi-ton stone. No miracle. Just labor, material knowledge, and nerve. Reconstruction work suggests the shattered gateways once framed one another in a nested visual effect, as if visitors were looking through repeated stone thresholds into a single controlled space. Puma Punku was not only engineering, it was theater. Tiwanaku was called the American Stonehenge and the Baalbek of the New World. In the early 20th century, H.S. Bellamy even claimed a former moon had crashed here. That is the pattern. When ancient skill looks too exact, humanity gets demoted. But Puma Punku does not need aliens, diamond saws, or lost machines. It needs context, including the awkward fact that a 2006 restoration reset blocks incorrectly and deepened the illusion of a solved mystery. The harder explanation is enough. Tiwanaku masons built with exacting geometry, repeated forms, and ambition, and later centuries broke, moved, reassembled, and mythologized the debris. Puma Punku still feels uncanny, and it should. Not because it escaped history, but because it survived history badly. What remains is not a perfect machine from a vanished world. It is a ceremonial complex so disciplined in its making, and so violent in its afterlife, that the ruin still looks too deliberate to be real. The stones were measured, hauled, fitted, shattered, and misunderstood. That gap between skill and myth is why Puma Punku still matters. If you liked what you watched, please like and subscribe. We post interesting and crazy stories from throughout history every Wednesday and Saturday. Yesterday's craziness? Because yesterday was crazy too.